please look at the camera, introduce yourself with your name, your title, your pronouns, and the song that best describes you, but don't explain why.
All right, my name is Khalilah Lawson. I am the senior magistrate at the Cleveland Municipal Court. My pronouns are she, her, and I would say the song that best describes me is there's a song by Ava Max called Kings and Queens.
We would pop champagne and raise a toast.
You asked us to conduct this interview in front of your high school. Could you tell us why?
So I grew up in the city of Cleveland, born and raised right here in this very neighborhood. This neighborhood, this area, this space is very, it's tied to my heart. It's very personal to me. I graduated right here from Collinwood High School. A lot of my fundamental years was right here in this space. I went to school, to an elementary school called East Clark, which is not too far from here, right around the corner. I spent a lot of time in the Collinwood Library. I went to daycare right down this street. So this is like a hub for like all my fundamental years where I spent so much time as an adolescent and those formative years that really had an impact on how you develop, just going to college, how I grew up, decisions I made, after school practices. I was a high stepper when I was in high school. So we spent like so much time over in that parking lot over there, practices in the heat, doing parades, marching up and down St. Clair to Kuwait. So just very personal to me and very near and dear to my heart and helped mold me to.
You're running for a municipal court seat. Can you describe what the municipal level handles to the average Clevelander who may not know?
The municipal court handles misdemeanors. Misdemeanors are your minor offenses that are not felony levels. So if you just think of the highest misdemeanor is a misdemeanor of the first degree. The max time you can get for M1 is 180 days in jail. So jail. When you think of your felony level, that's prison. Can go up to life in prison, more higher sentences. So when you think of your municipal court, you think of your traffic offenses, your disorderly conduct, your open container, maybe assault cases or misdemeanor DVs, things of that nature. So they range from an M1, which is your highest misdemeanor, to a M2, 3, 4, and then your minor misdemeanor. And we are the court. I call it the everyday court for everyday people because a lot of times when people come into the municipal court, it could be their first encounter with the court. But sometimes it can be a revolving door. And our whole goal is to make sure that we're providing programming and services for people to help them get back on track.
You just mentioned recidivism, and what we wanted to say is you're going to be the point of first contact for a lot of people with the judicial system. So what are you going to do to ensure they're not pulled into a vicious cycle of recidivism?
I think the most important thing that you can have as a judge is compassion. Compassion and understanding that people are coming into the court for different reasons. I went to law school. I understand the law. But a lot of our litigants that come in front of us, it could be their first encounter. And sometimes things just happen. And I think it's important for us to have common knowledge and common sense and understand that everyday people go through everyday things, and that's okay. But we're here to be a helping court to make sure we can help them and assist them with programming, whether it's, driver license cases, mental health, drug court, veterans docket, and trying to see what is appropriate for every person's needs. I think something that's so big as a judge is to make sure, and I'll say even like a common sense judge. I'm from the city. I grew up in Cleveland. I'm a first generation college student. First person in my family to go to college. And so I grew up here. I know what the inner city looks like. I know challenges that people face because I face those same challenges. So I think the most important thing is not to quote unquote judge, no pun intended, but to make sure that you have a listening ear, that you have patience, and you're understanding holistically what's going on with the person. I think something that we learned in law school was totality of the circumstances. So yes, you're in front of me for this, but how did we get here and what's going on, with the bigger picture as to why you may keep coming back into the court and how can we solve that issue? I think something that's so important is understanding pleas. I had a conversation with a gentleman the other day and he didn't even understand that you could ask a prosecutor for a plea offer. A lot of times in municipal court, people are not represented by counsel because you're only entitled to an attorney if you're facing jail time. So if you can't afford to go hire your own attorney, you may not get one. And so I think as a judge, we have to still make sure people's rights are protected and they understand. and hold everybody in the courtroom accountable, and making sure people are getting a fair shot no matter what side you're on, and making sure, we have prosecutors that are explaining pleas to litigants and things like that, and knowing what they can ask for and what they can't.
The city of Cleveland is a uniquely impoverished city, surrounded by generational wealth in suburbs. The system of cash bail is one remnant of American judicial history that continues to disadvantage everyday Clevelanders over and above the rich and well-to-do. What is your position on the role of cash bail in municipal court, and what role do you see detention serving in sentencing?
So cash bail is a concept that has plagued our criminal justice system, and there's this, idea how it disadvantages a lot of people within our criminal justice system. If we look at who's affected versus who can pay to not be affected, is something that is something that is always considered and should be in the front of the mind. I think what's important, especially in municipal court, depending on what the level of offense is, if we're issuing personal bonds, so that we know, okay, hey, I'm going to give you a chance to make sure that you come back to court. Let's go over your rights. Let's go over what's happening in your case. And if that case calls, for a bond to be set, and it's not a crime where you're harming the public, we're still trying to protect the community. There's nothing wrong with setting a personal bond and then making sure that we're following and tracking that person. There are other alternatives like GPS monitoring and things like that. I think what's so important in our court system, and I've had experience as a prosecutor, defense attorney, and a bailiff, is getting a probation investigation. And let's look into the person's background and seeing, hey, are they appropriate for A, B, C, and D? Because there are a lot of factors that can go into that to determine what's best as far as services, to make sure that we can get this person in court, but we're not disenfranchising them financially and penalizing them because they can't afford to pay a bond.
Justice can only be attained when everyday Clevelanders believe in the judicial system as fair, impartial, and ultimately advocating for their interests. Transparency, accountability, and ethical conduct are foundational to that trust. What steps will you take to promote transparency and accountability in your courtroom, and how will you ensure you remain fair and impartial while promoting equity under the law?
So, integrity, experience, and dedication are my primary pillars for this campaign. I am the everyday Clevelander. I am a person that was born and raised 5 minutes from here. I have grown up and seen crime. I've seen people wrongfully convicted. I have family members that have served sentences and been penalized and harmed by the criminal justice system. But I've also been victimized, so I've seen every side of the fence. And growing up, the whole idea for me was I just wanted to be fair. That's why I went to law school, because I saw so many people affected by the system and not knowing what are my rights. How do I go to court and speak up for myself if I don't have anybody to do that? And at a certain point for me, it became an obligation. It's always been a passion of mine to help people and advocate. But I was like, at some point, somebody has to speak up for people and not placate to the system or this game. Like, if we're going to be fair, let's be fair. We're going to be transparent, let's be transparent. And you have to have representation in positions that represent the people of the city of Cleveland. And so I'm running for judge because I represent the people that I want to serve. I understand the dynamics of the city. I have that same background. I have a passion to serve and to be fair. I come from a working class family. My parents worked to make sure that I could go to school. My father was born on a farm in Durham, North Carolina, and my grandmother had to carry him and stand up on a bus. He's a generation removed from being a sharecropper. She had to carry him on a bus just to get here to Cleveland, Ohio. And so generationally, I've seen what hard work, what grit is, and what it takes to really, pull yourself up and work hard to get to where you want to be. And I've worked hard. I've never asked for a handout. I've never asked for favors. I've always had to work to get to where I am today. And Clevelanders are hardworking people. We know what it means to work. I support working class families. I support unions. I support the everyday person. So why not have that same person in a seat, in a judicial position, that knows, okay, I know what character is, I know what integrity is, I know what it means to be fair, and hold everybody accountable. from the attorneys to the police officers, to the witnesses, whoever's coming in this courtroom. My goal is to make sure everybody is treated fairly, because I want the same thing done to me if it was my mother, my father, my brother, my sister that was in court as well. Just be fair.
Equitable access to the judicial system means more than constitutional and legal protections for due process. It's oftentimes difficult and burdensome for everyday Clevelanders to make court dates and participate in arduous processes they don't necessarily understand. How will you ensure that the judicial system is accessible to everyone in real terms? And what steps will you take to ensure that those who encounter the municipal court feel that their rights were upheld and justice was served in a timely manner?
That is like the biggest thing I believe in, is accessibility and timeliness. And I'm so serious. Like, I've been saying this consistently. Accessibility is a issue for court. People already don't want to be in court. And so if you have to take off work, if you have to find a babysitter for your children, all these, some people may consider minor inconveniences, are not minor to everyday people that really have to struggle, that have to find parking, that have to pay, then come down to court, and then potentially wait 3 hours for their case to be heard. I think something that's so important that we should continue to implement are Zoom hearings. We had them in the pandemic. They worked out in that way. I don't see why we have to stop. And I'm not saying in every single situation, but if there are cases where we know that a person cannot make it to court or can't be here, or that it will severely impact their livelihood, i.e., losing their job because they have to take off work. Everybody doesn't have the luxury to just be able to call off. They may get suspended. They may get points taken, depending on what their job is, if they miss a certain amount of days. So I think accessibility comes in different forms. I think Zoom options are definitely important and can definitely help with that. And having people have a set time. I know a lot of times people get their court date and they're like, well, my court date's at 9 a.m. And then you come to court and you're like, oh, everybody's court date, is 9 a.m. So trying to have maybe structured times where people can come in, get heard, and then go about their day. But that's why I think Zoom would come in and can be extremely helpful. I think something else that could be important we could try to implement is maybe an evening court. Not every day, but maybe we have a set docket for evening court for people that cannot get off work, or that, may work different shifts. And it may be more convenient for you to come down in the evening. If we have a set docket that's catered to that, it helps with traffic, with parking, paying fees, maybe childcare and things like that. And so just making sure that we have those different options, because obviously I'm here to serve. I work for the people. They don't work for me. And so my whole goal is to make sure that I'm providing you access to the court, explaining what the hearings are, explaining what you need to do. A lot of times people come in front of the court, and I like to use the term cultural competency, where I may be able to understand that there's some things you don't understand without saying it. Because I'm not in a position to embarrass you, to be condescending, to speak over your head. But I can tell maybe there's something you don't quite understand. And they say, you know what? Let me help you better understand this. Instead of saying, let's come back week after week. What can we do or try to solve in this moment? And you can get it taken care of. So then maybe we'll give you a little bit more time. And let's be honest and transparent, like those words we use, to make sure you're getting what you need to get done. So when you do have to come back to court, we can get the case taken care of and solved, and not be, a revolving door. So access is so big, it's so important. Many people are turned off by the court system because, like, man, I've had to come down here, I had to take off work and do all this. It's like, we don't want that to be your experience.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to be able to solve your case and go about your life.
Cleveland was once the richest city in the world and served as the center of the Industrial Revolution in North America. This success was accomplished only by cultivating a rich melting pot of people who immigrated to Cleveland in search of opportunities and a decent life. For immigrants today, any level of justice involvement can mean deportation, as we've seen men, pregnant women, and children all grabbed by ICE as soon as they leave the court steps. What will you do to defend the rights and dignity of immigrant Clevelanders, and how will you protect Clevelanders in your courtroom from illegal detentions and federal overreach?
As a justice system, we have to make sure that all people's rights are protected no matter what. Making sure that they have proper counsel, and especially in regards to immigration and what we see going on in our country, reaching out to potentially immigration attorneys, specialists, people that have knowledge in this area, and making sure before anything is done legally, well, I won't say legally, making sure before anything is done criminally with the person regarding cases or pleas or sentencing, that they have the proper representation necessary and understand any ramification that could happen outside of that, and making sure that we're looking at the case and saying, hey, is this proper? Are we doing the right thing? Because what we don't want is to ruin somebody's livelihood. So the whole goal is to make sure, again, that we're providing equal access to justice for everybody and making sure they have access to counsel.
Hardworking, honest people make mistakes, and the material conditions in which people live are directly linked to justice involvement, professional success, and life satisfaction. The American judicial system is predicated upon justice being served only when punishments are dealt out as deterrents and consequences of crimes. Ohio was home to the prison abolition movement in the 1800s and was a center for the progressive movement. However, our judicial system remains punitive and limits opportunities for restorative justice. What is your opinion about alternatives to fines and incarceration? And what role do you see restorative justice principles and practices playing in your courtroom?
I think restorative justice is so important. You don't know a person's background. You don't know a person's story and what they're going through. Going back to looking at a case holistically. Sometimes we need restorative care. It's not just enough to say, oh, make a punishment that's solely punitive and that be a deterrent. Because a deterrent rather. A lot of times it's not. A lot of times it takes services. They may need to get involved with an AA service through a local church, and you don't know that local church may have a food bank where that person can volunteer and in turn build community relationships. The whole goal of the court system is to also be relational, not just hand out punishment, because that's not solving anything, especially for the people that we serve. If we want to make better citizens, if we want to make people more responsible, we have to make sure that we are serving them in every capacity that we can. Still, if a person has to be held accountable, they do, but there are other alternatives to jail, to court costs, fines. There are services that can be done within the neighborhoods, within the communities, and maybe that's something positive. Maybe they meet a mentor. Maybe they have an encounter that says, you know what, doing this really changed my life, versus just paying, $500 in fines. And so if we can place people in certain parts of the community where they can give back, I think that's so important to me. That has more of an impact on a person's heart. It makes them want to be a part of the community and say, you know what, I want to turn a leaf. I want to make sure that I'm contributing properly as a citizen that can, move my life forward and everybody else that I may encounter. So I think restorative programming is so important.
Your resume is extensive and impressive. The downside to having done a great many things is that there are fewer things to do in the future. Why are you running for this seat, and what do you have to offer Clevelanders that your opponent cannot?
I feel like the future is limitless. Sky's the limit. I do have an extensive background, and what I offer is experience in every single area of the court system. I've been in public service continuously. I've never had a break in time. So when I say I've been a bailiff, a prosecutor, a defense attorney, a magistrate doing wills, estates, and trusts, it's not just to say, oh, look at my fancy resume everywhere I've done. The whole goal is to make sure I've worked in every single arena of the court system, and especially as a bailiff, behind the scenes. And that gives you an opportunity to learn how to navigate a courtroom, how the courtroom should be ran. You're preparing the judge for the docket. So in that sense, you understand what to do. You understand the dynamics of having a defendant brought up, making sure, the jail is properly set up if we need to have like Zoom calls orchestrated. And I think it's so important experience I bring is that I have been doing this consistently. There's never been a break in time where I've been removed from the court. My entire career has been in the courtroom. And I think when you see that over time consistently, it makes you a better judge and makes you be able to be in a position where you can make sure you're serving your litigants in the way necessary.
Alrighty. As a judge, and likely already as a magistrate, you deal with an immense caseload each year. What do you do in order to remember that your decisions will have life-altering effects on people?
I think that's something internal that you have to know. There's not one specific incident or something I can name that triggers you to remember that. I think as a person, as a human being, every day, there's something inside of you that says, I affect this person's life today. The struggle with pain can change anybody's life. And you have to remember, I think as a human, just nature, if somebody's in front of you with a life-altering decision, you have to know that whatever I do can change any outcome and it can have tremendous effect. Principles that I consider or always have had instilled in me: patience, understanding, compassion. And going back to my experience in public service, you have to be patient. You have to be patient with victims, with defendants, with advocates, with court personnel, just to make sure everything flows together. So I think when you are in a position of that type of power and you have the ability to affect people's lives, the biggest thing is patience. I'm a mom, I have children. It's a lot that goes into how to navigate day-to-day life. And you understand that things happen, mistakes happen. How can we navigate and move forward and find better solutions? And so that's something that I'll offer. That's something that's in me, that nobody has to teach. So I think that's important. That's something that I take with me, just my day-to-day living.
No one is immune to bias. Judges in Louisiana have been found to increase and decrease sentences for defendants following losses and wins, respectively, by the LSU football team. What will you do to ensure that a bad day, a bias, or anything else won't get in the way of justice?
Life is not a game. When we're sitting on that bench and we're making decisions for people, it is not a game. We're not running plays. It's not a coin toss to see, hey, what am I going to do today? That is not how you judge. That is not why I took an oath to make sure that I am fighting for justice. That has no room or no place on the bench. Now, understandably so, people have good days. We are all human. We are not immune from what happens in our day-to-day lives, but we have a responsibility not to bring it on the bench, or you adjust accordingly. In my everyday life, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, my kids make mistakes, things happen. The morning might not go as we think it should, but you adjust. You don't have a reactionary personality where you're causing more harm than good because you had a bad day. That's not what the job calls for. That's not what people stand before us for us to do. In regards to being prepared, if you have proper preparation, that prevents piss poor performance. We all know what the P's stand for. Because things will happen. But if I am reviewing my case file before my hearing, before the sentencing, before the trial, whatever the case may be, maybe I need to make sure I have a pre-sentence investigation. I need to make sure that all defense attorneys and prosecutors have proper discovery. We're reviewing it. We're having notes. So in the event I may have a bad day or something goes on, I'm drawn back to my notes. Just like if you're a student in school and you're studying, you've prepared, you've written your notes. So if something kind of throws you off, you're like, wait a minute, let me center, let me be brought back to where I need to be to make sure I'm focused and I'm aligned with what I'm supposed to be doing, why I'm here, what I'm studying, in that perspective. But as a judge, how am I supposed to be rendering justice and doing it fairly, with patience, with compassion, with understanding? Because we got to check, all that at the door, and it has no room on the bench.
We couldn't find your voting records on the public voter roll. What party do you belong to and why?
So I do belong to the Democratic Party. It may not have been able to be found because my information is redacted due to me serving as a prior county prosecutor. So for safety and things like that, a lot of my information is redacted. But I do identify as a Democrat, and I voted in every election. If there's an election that I didn't vote in, for 7 years, I was not living in the state of Ohio. I was attending college in Louisiana and Michigan for 7 years straight. Upon graduation, I went to college and completed my undergraduate for 4 years and went to law school for 3 years in Louisiana and Michigan. And so in those instances, I voted in those places where I had residence at. But I've consistently voted as a Democrat. I voted in primary elections, general elections. Those are the values I identify with, where we're fighting for justice and civil rights for all people, no matter their socioeconomic background, cultural background. And that's what I intend to continue to do and how I continue to serve.
After the last election, Jesus Christ. After the last election, the Democratic establishment decided that it wanted to pursue a more moderate, conservative position in an attempt to win. Do you agree with this decision?
So I think in answering this question, I identify as a Democrat. And a lot of us identify as Democrats, but everybody doesn't identify with the same values in the way a system or an establishment can be ran. I think we can all agree that these are our values, but I may not necessarily agree on certain points of how the party decides to move. So I can speak personally to how I believe and how I feel in regards to the judicial seat and what I will do in my position. Running for judge is nonpartisan. My party values should not come into play when I am engaging with litigants. And my whole goal is to be fair or non-biased. So in this sense, I don't think it matters how you identify, whether Democrat, Republican, independent. The bigger question is, how do you care about people? How do you treat people? And how will you be fair? And how do those values line up with how we are serving our community? And for me, that's always priority: humanity, rights, due process, and treating everybody the same across the board, no matter what my affiliation is. And that's inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom. Obviously, we want good people in political offices. We want good people, in the world. So aside from our party, how are we being good humans, good Americans, and making sure that we're just treating everybody the right way?
All right. So, like you said, this is a nonpartisan local race. Judges at all levels, though, have been instrumental in slowing the fascist takeover by MAGA policies. We've seen judges block orders, block detentions, order that people wrongfully sent to Venezuela and other countries returned. If elected, what would you do to keep our small corner of the United States democratic and just?
Again, the stroke of a pen can change anybody's life. And going back to being a nonpartisan bench in a nonpartisan position, politics impacts a lot of things. What it shouldn't impact is people's lives. So going back to those core principles of fairness, integrity, and justice, that is what the focus should be, not how can I advance my political party's, views, while administering justice. Because if that's the case, then that brings in bias. Because I'm considering outside factors, other than what I should be considering that's right in front of me on this piece of paper. Am I following the law? Is what I'm doing right or wrong in the eyes of the law? And am I doing it fairly? The law is the law. We got to follow it. We have to make sure we're implementing it properly. And if for any reason, if precedent needs to be set for something different, then so be it, because we do have that power to read cases to understand, well, maybe this is not applicable in this manner, and maybe new precedent should be set. But is the precedent being set for the right thing? And again, I think that's why it's so important to make sure we are electing officials that have that conscience, that have that discernment, to make sure, how am I thinking about this? How am I processing this? Not someone like a great Wizard of Oz who's pulling these puppet strings to make sure that you do what you're told. No, as an independent, free thinker, you have the ability to do what's right and what's wrong, and to rely on discernment and your consciousness to make good decisions. And that is what I intend to do. That is what I am going to do day in and day out as I serve the people of the city of Cleveland.
And let me follow up really quickly. You mentioned a lot of the rule of law, following what the law says, and trying not to bring bias in. I think that's admirable. I think also, though, it's important to acknowledge that a lot of our law is based on racist, xenophobic, homophobic, or sexist ideals. For example, in the landmark case Johnson v. McIntosh, Judge Marshall ruled that Native Americans did not have the capacity to own land, and therefore it was proper for the United States to take that land from them and to sell it to private settlers. In this view, where the law can't always be viewed as completely unbiased, how will you work to ensure that working with this broken but the best we can system serves justice?
So something I mentioned, which I think is extremely important, is precedent. Precedent is important because new cases bring new precedent. And having cases in front of you where it's like, well, you know what? Yeah, we do have a law in the books and we have this, but it's outdated. It's archaic. It doesn't apply. Maybe we have that rule, but how is this, what's going on currently in front of me, applicable in this situation? Because as things change, laws changes, legislation changes. But again, we also have the ability to create new precedent. And so, yes, we have the law as our backdrop, but it's not the end all be all. And as far as how that can be applied, and the key thing still is fairness. What is fair, what is right, and how are we applying modern day situations to maybe something that may be outdated on the books? And can we create new law based on that. I think that's why we have such landmark cases, and we have the Supreme Court, we have the Court of Appeals, and we say, you know what? Well, based on this should be the new law. And this case set the precedent for that, and now we're following this. And that's why we need great attorneys, great legal minds that can argue these types of things in court. And of course, as a judge, to uphold that, to make rulings that say, you know what? This is fair. That's outdated. We're going to apply it this way, and having that mind to analyze that way. And so I'm all for precedent. I'm all for setting things that need to be modernized as opposed to something that's old, outdated on the books. And how are we, again, administering justice fairly?